Hello, my name is Brian Gustafson, and I am the coroner here in Rock Island County. It's my pleasure to be here with you today.
Are you aware of the Catholic Church's stance on euthanasia and the Death with Dignity Act?
I am. Would you like me to discuss that with you?
Yes.
Uh, as coroner in Illinois, we do not have that law at this time. Just because we don't have that law doesn't mean that certain aspects of that law don't take place every day underneath the noses of the physicians who take care of the patients. Um, at this point, the law is only in effect in, I want to say, a handful of states. It started out of Oregon, Washington State. I think Hawaii has passed it. Montana doesn't have a law that says it, but Montana has a Supreme Court ruling that indicates that there's nothing wrong with it if a physician decides to help somebody. Um, but as this law gains steam throughout, the Northwest, I highly anticipate that many of the states, both in the Midwest and the East Coast, will adopt certain aspects of the law, if not the law within itself.
Do you believe that the Catholic Church's stance is reasonably supported?
That would be a trick question. Um, as a practicing Catholic, and I think that any Catholic is truly a practicing Catholic if we look at Jesus' true teachings, none of us are perfect, and we're always practicing to get better at our skills. So, do I think it's on track with the teachings? I do. Um, I think there needs to continue to be a separation between church and state. I think that I think that as a practicing Catholic, I'm frequently reminded uh, what my role in the church is. So, for me, would I participate in something like this? I'm not dying, so I really can't answer that question. But I've watched enough people die to know that I'd sure like for them to have a choice.
So, what kinds of effects do you think the Death and Dignity Act have on the teachings of the Catholic faith?
Well, they totally question our faith as Catholics. They push it to the limits. They push it to the point where our beliefs are non-existent or not valuable, which I don't believe. Um, the Death with Dignity Act indicates that a physician has to decide that you have 6 months or less to live. That's probably my biggest problem with the entire bill. Okay, I've seen people who have been diagnosed or referred to hospice to live 18, 24 months, way beyond the 6 month um, parameter that actually allows them to qualify, if you will, for hospice care. Same thing goes for this act. Nobody knows except God how long we really have left. A doctor can say, I believe you have a week to a month to 2 months, 2 months to 6 months before, your disease will take your life. So that's a huge problem. What if it's too soon? What if the doc's wrong? What if two doctors are wrong? Most of these states have built into the law you have to have two physicians to say, yes, you're terminally ill. Yes, you have less than 6 months to live. And you have to have two separate requests from the individuals who's asking for it. There's just so many outside parameters that we really don't have control of, including when we're going to die or when God wants us to die. So, does that answer that question? It's tough. These are tough questions because the whole topic is very, very controversial. It's very, very personal, and not only is it just for the individual who is actively dying, but it's also very personal for the family members that are surrounding them.
Mm-hmm.
So it all needs to be considered.
Mm-hmm. This is actually related to that. So, in your opinion, does euthanasia help the family unit or the individual more?
I would say it assists both. If that is a decision that the family chooses to make, and it should be a family decision, in my opinion, it shouldn't be just one person's. Um, if you have, a family unit that's surrounded you throughout, you know, the the great times, if you will, you need that same family unit in the bad times. Um, so it should be a family decision. If not, you're going to have a bunch of infighting, and somebody's going to be very uncomfortable with a decision that you're very comfortable making, and that can be very detrimental.
Do you believe the Death and Dignity Act has been successful or helpful in places like Oregon, Washington, or Hawaii?
I think the law can be helpful at times, and I think it can be very detrimental at times. Um, Most people don't understand that as a country, we spend 90% of the money caring for individuals during the last 10% of their life. Does that make sense? The last 10% of your life, we spend 90% of the money that we spend throughout the entire life on that short little time frame. But that's just the way it is. I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing, but most people don't realize. And if you think about that, that's why certain other countries, with their universal health care, when it gets to that anticipated last 10% of your life, they start cutting back as to how much money they're going to spend on treating that 10%. So instead of spending 90% of the funds on that 10% of your life, say you get cancer, they may not treat that cancer because it's too expensive. So, can that bill help that? Can it hurt that? Can it make it so the government decides how long you live instead of God? Maybe.
As the coroner, do you have to work with families a lot when they experience the loss of loved ones?
Every day I work with families when they lose a loved one. And you would think that for some families, when it's a quote unquote expected death, that it's much easier. Even though it's an expected death, families can very often at times have a very difficult time with it. Even though it's expected, it's never easy. Um, I've had some family members say, well, it's a blessing that he went this way. Um, his quality of life was very, very poor. Um, he was very unhappy that mom had to stay with him 24 hours a day, or one of the other siblings had to stay with him. So it is what it is.
Do many families speak about having to watch their loved ones suffer before dying? If so, do you think the Death and Dignity Act would eliminate this difficulty?
One of the hardest things that we as children will ever have to do is to watch somebody we love, whether it's one of our own children or whether it's one of our parents or grandparents for that matter, go through something that we can't do anything about. We can't help it. We can't fix it. We can't stop it. It's incredibly difficult and it's incredibly painful to have to watch a loved one go through something so, I don't know what the right word is. Dramatic's not the word. Traumatic, I guess, would be the word, because that's what it is. It's hard to watch. It's hard to be a part of. It's something you never forget. Do I think that the law would alleviate that? Yeah, it would definitely alleviate that. But without that experience, they say that what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Sometimes we have to go through very difficult times to see what is on the other side. And then after we go through that experience and we have a chance to look back on it, oftentimes we are much, much stronger individuals. And I think God would want it that way.
How beneficial is physician-assisted suicide to families and the community?
It's incredibly useful to the families that want it. And again, as I started this conversation, we talked about separation between church and state, and you know, that's how the government and that's how the United States of America wants it to be. And I believe to a certain degree that that's a good thing. But I don't like anybody telling me how to run my life, um, or I don't want anybody telling me that the teachings or my faith that I believe in aren't the right thing. So Is it right for the community? I think the choice is right in this instance. Um, I think there are certain times when it's a beneficial thing, but I think it's an individual choice, and it should be up to the individual. Um, I think again, I don't like to be told what to do. I know that I don't want anybody to tell my faith to teach me anything. I want my faith to teach me what I want to believe. So keep it separate, but I do think it should be available.
Have you ever heard talk of Illinois adopting a similar act to the Death and Dignity Act? Could you see this happening in the near future?
I have not heard of any talk either in Springfield or in any of the political pockets that I, fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to look at it, have access to. Um, I don't I don't think that we'll have this soon. I think that it'll take 10 years. I would say 10 years or more before it actually is something that this part of the country, we're very divided here in the Midwest. I mean, you know, out in California and out in the West Coast, they have rather liberal beliefs. They do. Um, we're very mixed. We're very mixed. Um, a solid mixed bag of conservatives and liberals. I don't think we can get enough of either side to agree that it's the right or the wrong thing to do. So I don't think either way. I don't think we'll get it for at least a decade. But as I say that, I know, I know that individuals who are actively dying, individuals who are actively involved in hospice care, individuals who are in a hospital or a nursing home scenario, have access to medications that provide what we call in the healthcare field as comfort measures only. And that can be very widely interpreted, if you know what I mean. All it takes is a little gasp of something like that, and somebody saying, "Oh my God, they're not comfortable. Give them something. Give them another. Give them another." Next thing you know, last rites have been, or we don't do last rites anymore. We do anointing of the sick um, in our religion. You know, that's been requested and offered by either the deacon or the priest, uh, and then it's time. And sometimes we make that time a little quicker than what our church might want us to.
What effect do you think it would have on our community if it was passed in Illinois?
Depends. I mean, there's two polar sides to this, and I want to make sure I hit both of them. Okay. Part of society is going to say, well, it's a very good thing because of the 90-10 rule that I talked about earlier. 90% of the funds are spent on the last 10% of somebody's life. That's a huge financial responsibility. You'll have one polar side of it that says that's wrong. Why should you spend that much money on 10% of somebody's life where the quality of life isn't that good to begin with? But then you'll have the other polar side that says all life is precious, all life is valuable, and every nickel you spend on it is worth it. So you're going to have two totally different sides. Some saying, yes, it's a great thing to do. Some saying, no, we shouldn't have that opportunity. So you're going to have that argument everywhere you go. Um, they had it in Oregon before they passed this law. They still have it now. And to this day, it's a very controversial scenario. It's been my pleasure to be here with you today. If there are ever any questions, I can always be reached by going to the Rock Island County website or just looking me up in the phone book. I'm pretty easy to access. Have a great day.